Hi everyone, it's Kasia from Tarot Map, and I'm reviving the Inspired Tarot Map series. And my first guest is Emily Carding, and I'm pretty sure you know Emily, but just for those who might just, I don't know, be born yesterday, Emily is the creator of the Transparent Tarot and Tarot of the She, and of the Transparent Oracle that I don't have, so I won't show. Hello, Emily.
Hi, Casio. It's so lovely to be with you. Thank you.
Emily, I'm so excited to have you on because, as I mentioned briefly before we tapped to recording, I think I have your decks. Like your decks have been my companion since like my very, very beginning of starting like a YouTube channel and going like a bit more professionally with tarot. And I remember seeing this transparent tarot somewhere online, and I'm thinking like, what the fuck? Wow, what is it? This is weird. I love it, you know? So this was like, I'm always on the lookout for original decks. And I thought like, I would love to ask you, because as we discussed, it was published in 2008. So it wasn't a time like now, you know, that there was all these crazy decks available and it's edged like this and the shape is hexagonal. You know, now we have like all this everything. This was mega unique. This was like, wow, that's strange, you know? And I thought like, how did you even come up with the idea of it being like transparent? Like just lead us through this process because I find it fascinating.
Gosh, I wish I had a process I could share with you, but genuinely it just popped into my head. So I'd finished all of the paintings for Tarot of the She, which was published a few years later, but that was the first deck that I created, and it had been published as a majors only collector's deck by Adam McLean up in Glasgow. But that was just the majors, like 100 copies were done or something. But I was quite enriched by that process and inspired by that process, and I wanted to make another deck, but I didn't know what. And at that time, there wasn't, as you say, there wasn't all of these great innovations happening that have come through the I think through the Kickstarter and the self-publishing revolution that's happened in tarot, which is remarkable, and I can't keep up with it. But there was still, at that point, there were still thousands of decks of different themes, and I was thinking, well, what hasn't been done already? At that point, I was like, well, I don't know what hasn't been done. What theme could I do that would be interesting? Because I have no interest in repetition. I have no interest in being unoriginal. But it wasn't a logical thought process. I think I went to all this had been churning around in my head, and then I was away to celebrate New Year up in near on the shore of Loch Lomond up in Scotland, and I didn't have Wi-Fi or internet or anything up there. I woke up at 3 in the morning. I remember sitting upright with this idea just fully formed in my head, going, "Oh, a transparent tarot." And it would have to be on plastic maybe, and it would have to be very simple images that you could overlay, and then when you overlay them, it shifts the meaning and the images interact. And I couldn't Google to see whether somebody else had already done this. I mean, my first thought was, well, if I've had this idea, then obviously somebody else must have had this idea before. But I started making sketches and things. My first thought was, I can't have any figures in the majors because it'll all get too muddled and complicated. I need to simplify and depersonify and have these archetypal forces represented as the most simple distilled symbols I can create. And after a few days of being up in Scotland, away from the internet, and just making sketches and frantically thinking, I have to do this before anybody else does it. And then being able to like search and see, he was like, I don't think anybody else has done this. I have to be the first. I started frantically, like, because I just wanted to be the first. I didn't mind if other people took that idea and ran with it. In fact, the idea that it might be a step in the evolution of tarot really appealed to me. I really, and I think only now have people really started to play with that idea. But yeah, I just wanted to be the first. I don't know whether that's an ego thing or whatever it is, but I had this idea that was just pushing on the inside of my head that just needed to come out. And I think I made all of the art in a combination of using tracing paper to see how the particular cards that I knew had to interact in a particular way, that I could design them so that they would. So many of the majors are designed to interact in a particular way. All of the numbers, so all of the aces, the twos, the threes, the fours, etc., they're all designed to interact in a particular way. And then each suit is designed to form a pattern. Beyond that, it would be left to chance and random interpretation, because when you consider the fact that cards can be reversed but also flipped, mathematically you have billions of possible combinations, depending on how many cards you layer, but you know, it's a lot.
Wow.
So I was using
Wow.
tracing paper, and then I would layer them on the computer, but the images themselves are just created on A4 paper with felt tips, just dots of felt tip pen. And I think I made the artwork in 6 months, and then the book in 6 months. But it was extremely difficult to find a publisher. I approached all of the established tarot publishers at that time. I never entertained the possibility of self-publishing. I still can't be asked with that. But no, nobody was interested, because it would cost more money to produce than a standard tarot, and it was so different. They were afraid that people wouldn't go near it because it was so different. Whereas Schiffer at that point had only published one tarot previously, which was my friend Kim Huggins' book, The Sol Invictus Tarot. So they didn't.
So they just started actually with.
Yeah, at that point they had just started, and they didn't really know much about the market, which worked in my advantage, because the acquiring editor saw it and went, "Well, I just think this is a great idea." And she really, Dinah Roseberry, really stuck her neck out for me with Pete Schiffer Senior at the time, who sadly passed away a few years ago. And they were like, "Sure, yeah, it's going to cost more to do, but we'll just charge more. It'll probably be fine." So that was very brave of them. And
Yeah,
really
because
cool.
like I just find it, sorry to interrupt you, but I just thought, like, if I'm Schiffer and it's like I just published 2 tarot decks, and then comes Emily Carding and I'm like, "Listen guys, I have this amazing idea. Why don't you do a plastic cards? They see through and have just little symbols." And they're like, shit, I don't know.
Shit. Exactly. No, I feel I'm very lucky, because otherwise it just wouldn't have happened. I'd never have just produced it myself. I'd have been
It
like,
would have been probably really hard to self-publish this one. I mean,
just
now maybe not so much, but back then definitely.
I think I made some mock-ups, because you can print on acetate on a normal printer, and I made some mock-ups with those and then laminated it, but you got very thick cards that have air bubbles in, so I could have made like 10 copies or something. It would have been a very rare, like, it just would have been one of those ideas. It's like, oh well. But I did everything I could, and so yeah, I'm so grateful to them for that. But yeah, it really was a moment of inspiration, as opposed to a logical process of thinking something through.
Yeah, it sounds like total eureka, like this one brilliant moment, but probably so clear that you just picked up from there, and a couple of months later you have a deck ready. It's really incredible. I was actually wondering about the positioning of the elements on the card. So I'm sorry, Emily, I'm just have to pause. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Household duties. So yeah, I'm come back to this. Like, I was wondering about positioning of the elements, because I think that's the biggest fun of all, when you actually put them together. You know, like I love doing 3 card spreads or something, and I know I like the kind of storytelling really element, but I love when they come together. And right now, actually, I'm reviving your deck because I'm using this. I'm doing this Decanic Journey. It's the book by Susan Chang. It's called 33 Secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically about decans, like astrological decans. So every, sign has 3 decans, 10 degrees each. And what she does, she picks like, the minor arcana and what majors correspond in this decan to that
Oh,
arcana. So it's from Golden Dawn and these associations of like, the whole system. And I love using your deck for this because you can actually put, the 2 majors on top of the minor, and
oh,
they create
nice.
like another layer, like amazing.
Mm,
Like one of these weeks, I was just going, oh wow, I just so glad I have the transparent tarot, because it
mm,
totally brought up another layer to that combination. And it brings it like, you can't really like melt the cards when you have paper like this, whereas on the transparent tarot they actually like melting together, and it
mm.
just makes such cool stories when you put them, like on top of one another. I really, really like it. So
Thank you.
when you were doing that mock-up thing, you
Mm-hmm.
already had like the vision that they have to interact somehow? Because it's quite
Mm.
hard to imagine all of 78, like where to
So
put them
very
on the
well. I mean,
cards.
exactly. I mean, I couldn't conceive all of exactly how each of the 78 cards would would interact with each other. That would be too much for the human brain. But I had some ideas about how particular majors should interact, and did my best to make sure that any of the majors would interact in ways that were appropriate to the meanings of the cards. So obvious examples are the Emperor and Empress, as you'll see when you put those together, that taking the sequence of the sun and the moon, the star, and so on, are particularly obvious examples. All of the majors, if you look at any of them, you'll see for most of them there's a circle that appears, it's not quite central, it's sort of slightly in the upper portion of the card. Yeah, so there's the wheel. So all of the majors are either sort of in that or incorporate that or are outside of it in different ways. Um, and so the geometry in that way was quite simple. But yeah, I started with the majors. I realized that I'd taken on a lot when I started looking at the minors. So as I said, that all of the each number in the sequence, so all of the twos
Mm.
form a pattern, the threes form a pattern, and mostly, I think, if I remember correctly, it's starting in the center and working its way outwards. Um, I think for each suit actually starts in the center and then works its way outwards. Um, and then the twos all form a pattern, the threes all form a pattern, and so on.
Wow.
And that's the only real extent to which I could plan it. And I just had to kind of trust that when you start using it, because obviously it will sometimes happen that you will draw 3 cards and they'll all be taking up the same corner or something. But I was very thankful to find that when that did happen, there was a reason behind it, that in
Mm.
interpretation, in the reading, it all kind of made sense.
Yeah, I think with this type of tools, sometimes like this, a certain percentage of mysteries is always good,
Yeah.
like you can't really, control the whole thing. And
And
sometimes
it's
it's better
fluid,
if you
it's very
don't.
fluid. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So can I ask you about the Tarot of the She? Because if this was the
Mm,
first tarot, and I read in the introduction that you were studying with John and Caitlin Matthews as well.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that? Like, how old were you? and and how was the was it something that you've done? Was it like the first for you, or have you been like interested in, like, because this was Celtic shamanism, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you
Yeah.
were interested in the subject before, and with them you just deepen it, or you were just like, oh, I like it now and I wanted to study because you Celtic heritage as well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Um, Good. So I think I was always a big fan of John and Caitlin's work from when I first started to take an interest in that area of things as probably late teens, but especially when I went off to drama school. up in Yorkshire, and I came across a magic shop called Pentagram, where I spent a lot of time. So I was free to start to explore things. So I was always very interested in Arthurian legend from being a child. So I think that's where. So possibly I was familiar with John's work, particularly from a very young age, because he's been around for a long time. He's really one of the foremost authors on the subject. He's got, I think, 150 books now on various subjects related to that. So the first tarot I really started working with around the age of 19 or 20. I'm 47 now, by the way. So,
Me too.
very, very good age.
Yes,
Um,
agree.
yeah, it's not so bad. Apart from the whole, 50 looms, you're like, what does that even mean? Anyway,
We'll see. We'll see when we get there, but I'm sure it's going to be amazing too.
it will be amazing, Cassia. Yes.
Agree.
So it's the Arthurian legends and the landscapes of the Arthurian legends. I started off reading intuitively at around the age of 20 with the Arthurian tarot, John and Cashlin's
Yeah.
Arthurian tarot, which is beautiful landscapes. The court cards have figures and the majors, I think, have figures, but many of the minors are just landscapes. Something in that art really spoke to me. I think it's an artist called Miranda Gray. Just gorgeous work. And I think one of the first books on Celtic shamanism I picked up was by John as well. So I had been familiar with their work and indeed a great lover of their work for a good decade or so. Before I actually got to meet them. And that was marvelous, and I count them as friends. But I was fortunate enough to be able to take their I think it was even on the foundation course, because I did quite a few courses on Celtic shamanism with him, but John runs the foundation course, and then Caitlin runs the so you can pronounce that name so many different ways. Runs the more advanced courses, but this was the foundation course that John was running, and he'd recently discovered himself the symbol, the great glyph of the she, which is the
I show it.
spiral that you.
Yeah.
Very many people point out it's very similar to the Choku Reiki symbol, but it's different in notable ways. And so we did some journey work with that symbol, using it as a gateway. You literally travel through the symbol like it's a tunnel forms to the realm of the she. And a number of us in that session who were artists received the instruction or advice to incorporate the symbol in their artwork. And I'd already at that point, I'd been reading tarot for, I don't know, oh God, I mean time. How old was I? I don't even know.
For a long time.
I don't even know. But, at that point, a while, now much, much longer, but at that point, quite a while. So, okay, so let's work it out. That was 2005. Yeah, I don't know, over a decade, 15 years, whatever. And so this idea of incorporating the symbol into artwork, I thought, well, how about now is the time to maybe create a tarot deck? It will help in my tarot studies and myself to really study the meaning of each card and bring my own version of it. But I sort of had this really strong need or urge or vision or whatever you want to call it to create something that would be a bridge between worlds. So not just a deck that would be used for divination, but to create gateways. I think as artistically, as theatre maker, as artist, as writer, all of the different things I do, my urge is to create gateways. Somebody's just lit a fire. Oh, lovely, but my window is open and smoke is coming in, so I'm just going to close it. It's a bit much. And then the first card, which was Temperance, was actually I sat down with my daughter, who was very small at the time, it was November 2005, that I remember, because I had the idea of I was going to create a Christmas card that I could sell locally, I think was my idea. I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll do a nice Christian-friendly Christmas card. I'll sit down with my daughter and we'll sit and we'll draw together, and they can draw whatever they feel like, and I will do this card that I can sell. And then this being appeared, and then the antlers appeared, and this whole landscape. I was like, oh, this is something else. And I realized that this was where my tarot was going to start, and from that point all of these images would come. So I would focus on the symbol, the great glyph of the she. I would study two main systems. I studied the Rider-Waite and also the Thoth system, and I wanted to kind of combine the two and see which bits resonated with me through the colour symbolism, the planetary symbolism. Sort of input all of that information, sent it off through the symbol, and then received images back. Sometimes they would be fully formed and I would render them onto the page. There was no forward sketching or anything like that. Sometimes those images would evolve as I painted them, but they're all painted in a fairly rapid process. So I would draw straight down in ink on the paper and then watercolour paint. And normally it would be like a day or 2 days for each one max. And the whole thing took a year and a day. Sort of traditional, pretty much traditional fairy contract stuff. I couldn't drink. I remember it was like being under a contract. I couldn't drink at the time. It would interfere with the channeling process.
Did you have any cards that were like difficult to make, or was it just mostly a flow? Or do you remember some that were like, oh, I can't get this one, or that you felt like it's not just
well, they just came in the order that they came in, so I didn't try and force a linear order of like, I'm going to work through the majors in sequence. I started with Temperance, which is 14th. And then images would come. Sometimes I'd be like, okay, which card is that? Oh, okay, I see. So I would create them in the order that they came. I do think I did the majors first and then moved on to the minors, and then the court cards I think were last. But yeah, there wasn't a logical sequence. So in that way, I didn't have to force any of them. They just came in the order they wanted to come in. Some of them took longer than others, and it was always appropriate to the card that they did. Like some very fiery energy ones would come through very quickly, whereas I remember particularly the Maker, which is the equivalent to the Ace of Pentacles, really wanted to be crafted and have time spent on it. But most of the Pentacles were like that. But that was so all of that energy went into the energy of the card, which I hope comes across. But it was a very intense and absorbing process.
A year and a day. And the poems, did they come after you finished the artwork?
That was after.
After, yeah.
Yeah. So because I created all of those paintings, and it was published as a major arcana deck by Adam McLean up in Glasgow. He's a wonderful alchemist and publisher of various rare alchemical works, and at that point was publishing interesting tarots, things that he found interesting, I suppose. In an edition of, I think it was only 100, a limited edition of 100. So that was before the Transparent. But then I couldn't find a publisher for the complete deck until after I'd done the Transparent. And then after the Transparent was successful, Schiffer then wanted another Transparent deck. So I was like, well, I've done that. I'm not really interested in doing, but literally like 2 days after I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I'll see if inspiration comes. I had the inspiration for the Transparent Oracle, which is its own unique system, based on my magical and spiritual practice at the time, which remains very much the same.
So can you tell us a little bit more about it? Because I don't know anything about the Oracle, to be honest. I've seen it. I know it's around. But I don't know what's the theme, or like I don't know what's even on the images. Can you tell a little bit like about your practice? Like what is it?
Yeah. The Transparent Oracle, well, the first edition, which is now out of print, is a deck of 70 cards based on the 7 directions, so north, south, east, west, above, below, and within, and various correspondences, so 10 cards for each direction of various correspondences for that direction. So in terms of north, south, east, and west, so the earthly directions, you have a time of day, a weather condition, an element, an elemental, various animal guides, and also so it's like a mixture of shamanic and ceremonial magic,
Okay.
essentially. And it's round and designed to create mandalas or mandala-like design when you overlay them that can be used in meditation. It's much more about self-reflection and about the unity of everything, the connection of everything, your place in the web of the universe and your connection to forces and things around you. But it's also about the nature of things. So it's a really good one to ask philosophical questions of.
Okay.
What's the nature of the universe? Little questions like that, rather than what's going to happen in my career next week. It's not that kind of deck. It's much more philosophical, mystical deck, really.
Yeah. No, I love this side to divination anyway. So Thursday
And
morning,
then the
9
second
a.m. coffee. What's the nature of the universe? Let's get some answers now.
Let's have a look at that. Yeah, and then I'm doing. There's a second edition which is probably maybe out this summer, maybe this autumn. It's gone a little quiet, but that has 7 new cards which are archetype cards. So there's now also an archetype.
You added. Mm-hmm.
I added, yeah. I had the opportunity to do so. Schiffer approached me, or Red Feather, which is their tarot imprint now, approached me, and so this deck is now out of print. Do you want to do a second edition? Should we just reprint this, or do you want to do more? Since I created the first one, and I've gone back into theatre, and so my theatre practice is now sort of becoming merged with my magical practice. I was like, oh, let's bring that into it now. So you've got these archetypes about embodying archetypes and so on. So the artist, the healer, and so on. So yeah, so that's pretty cool. So then I had to make that deck for them before they would publish Tarot of the Sheep. But then so when they published it, when they accepted that, they were like, okay, you need to do obviously a book to go with it. And because the whole package for the Transparent Tarot turned out to be quite an expensive deck, because I did this whole massive book to go with it, because I was like, I have to explain as much of this as possible, and also everything that I want to say about tarot is in this. I was like, she felt like for me much more of a spiritual mission to create this bridge that I wanted to make accessible to as many people as possible. So I really wanted it to be affordable, more affordable than as affordable as they could make it. So I was like, oh, you've trimmed yours. That's very nice.
I did actually. Yes, we should say it.
That's a good idea. Yeah, it's nice. So I just wanted to create a small book to go with it, but yeah, for the majors, because it's such a magical deck, really, these sort of invocation oracular pronouncements came out, which I don't know whether you've ever tried speaking any of them out loud, but there's an extra dimension to it when you do so. And then the poems, that's just how the she really communicated these ideas through me. So yeah, it needed something that wasn't just your standard keywords, but at the same time I wanted to keep it so that it could be a smaller package.
Yeah. So would you say that like tarot is part of your like spiritual practice right now as well, or you still use it? Yeah.
Every day I use, as part of my devotions every night, really, I layer a card from the she, a card from the Transparent Tarot, and a card from the Transparent Oracle, just to give me a sense of like the pattern of things.
Yeah.
As they unfold.
Yeah, I totally get it, because I was just laughing that like, my Instagram account is actually like my diary. And I realized that I've been pulling, cards of the day since like for years, like daily, like without fail. I just love art. I'm like, very passionate about art and artists. And that's why I think I'm always on the lookout for like strange decks. But I did have also a really beautiful couple of experiences with your deck and like the she. I was like, yeah, I even had like a name. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it was like Lorna. It was like, I've had like Lorna or Yorna. Like, yeah, it was one of the she fairies at some point. I think it was the one from the Sun Cat, actually, which she's like reaching out, like, I
Yes,
just felt
yes.
like I'm invited. So I always use this cat actually to, before I even start reading with this deck ever, I always use the Sun Cat and ask if I can actually go, if I can
Oh, that's a
enter.
lovely idea.
Yeah, that somehow, like, I don't know, it was a couple of years ago. I haven't actually been using much of this deck, but recently, like, because I always get, as we said, like, I can barely keep up, and because I do tarot reviews and stuff, so I always get sent, new decks, and
Oh, that's
always on the
exciting.
lookout for something fascinating and new. And yeah, but this is definitely one of the decks that, like, it's close to me and that I actually made a connection with, as much as with the transparent as well. That's why I was so excited to have you on, because yeah, I see that now you kind of much more into the theater work, at least from your Instagram. What do we know really? But I can see that you're doing like a lot of acting right now. But I was curious
Well,
if,
that's my work, yeah.
yeah,
And my art, but it's all connected. And it varies with acting work. It varies between the work I make myself and the jobs that I get that are jobs,
yeah,
which always have. There's always something rewarding about them, even if it's jobs that are just well paid, which tend to be the ones that are less work. Strangely, it's a weird world.
passion costs, but passion pays in another currency.
Passion costs. So true. It's so true. But
Yeah,
then I recently brought out a book, So Potent Art, The Magic of Shakespeare, which shows some of the weaving together of those theatre and magic ideas. Um, I think a lot of the time, any magical process in my acting is like that's a personal thing with me. That is, an audience might feel it, but it's not necessarily on show. Um, but I certainly have an interest in the merging of those two things. But
merging. Yeah,
it's all connected. It's all
yeah.
connected.
I
But yeah,
think,
that's my main career now for sure. But I think that the sustainable way forward for me is going to be the balance between the acting work that I can get and that I can make, but making work doesn't often pay very well. So it's like I will probably be running more tarot courses online or creating courses that people can access like via videos and things at whatever time that works. That's
yeah,
my current plan. I sort of had this thought yesterday because I'd recently run a course on the goddess Hecate with my dear friend Sarita Deste, which was a 9-week sort of devotional course that went very
yeah,
well. And that was a mixture of recorded videos, and then we would do weekly live sessions with people. That was a really nice format. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to maybe think about developing more courses, but possibly some tarot courses
yeah. That's a great idea.
along those ideas. Probably if people, because the Transparent has had like since the second edition came out a couple of years ago, and then very recently a couple of people on TikTok discovered it. So the second edition of the Transparent Tarot has really taken off. Like it's had sort of a rebirth the last few months. This smoke is really smelling now. Um, but I'm thinking there's a lot of people out there who are looking at it and going, "Oh, what do I do with this?" So
Yeah,
there might be demand for courses specifically on my decks, but I'd like to do more general tarot courses as well, and maybe thinking along the lines of sort of guiding somebody through the process of creating their own deck, because there's lots of reasons, sort of magically and spiritually, publishing aside, just for your own personal reasons, why it's a really good idea for any student of tarot to create your own deck.
Yeah.
You don't need to be an artist, or not in the conventional sense of being able to draw, you know, sourcing images from anywhere. And if you're not looking at creating it for publishing purposes, but just for your own personal use, you don't need to worry about copyright or anything. So I think I quite like the idea of creating something that people can access at their own pace, and is somebody who's there to be like, okay, so today let's look at this, and just the support and discipline there to kind of guide you through the process, rather than, because looking at creating a whole deck of 78 cards from scratch, I think for a lot of people might seem really daunting.
Yeah, I think it
It
might be
is.
like a great idea, but when you start, you're like, oh shit, I don't think I
Oh,
finished
like
it.
where do you start, and how do you carry on, and how do you keep up that discipline?
So are you planning any new decks?
I have a few ideas floating about, but I don't know whether I have the time. At some point, I'll create a Lenormand, probably.
Oh, that's shorter. That should be okay. And you never know, like gathering from, you know, the conversation, it might just knock you on the head one night and you'll be like, okay, well, I wasn't, but I'm making it.
That's it. I tend to go with the flow, and wherever the inspiration and opportunities take me. There's a couple of ideas. Maybe there's already a few Shakespeare decks. So although I'd quite like to create a Magic of Shakespeare deck, I don't really know, because there's already a few Shakespeare decks, but we'll see.
Yeah, there's always another angle or something new that can come up.
Years ago, I started to make a Neverland tarot, so a Peter Pan one, and it was a really good idea, and I had it all sketched out, and I just never had the time to finish it. I don't know whether I'll ever go back to that, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get to the point where I might sit down and start another one. It's been a while.
And I quite like the balancing of different jobs. That's, I don't know, what star sign are you, Emily?
Yes.
I don't know, something fiery. No? I don't know.
Well, like anybody, I'm a mix. I mean,
we all might mix, but like just the sun for now.
I'm an Aquarian.
You're Aquarian, and the moon and ascendant, do you know?
Yeah, so my moon is in Aries.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that just makes sense.
That comes across, yeah.
Yeah.
And ascendant?
My is Virgo.
Oh, it's a Virgo.
So I have a really nice balance of elements, which I think explains how I ever get anything done, because I don't know, I look at, on a daily basis, I look at my life and I'm like, how did I ever achieve anything? But then somehow I continue to things happen. I'm like,
even Aquarians, right? Like that's fixed energy. So they kind of, you know, they can be stubborn like this, like they will finish.
Gosh, yes, the stubbornness. It's absolutely the stubbornness. It's certainly not discipline.
But the Virgo also gets it, like, you know.
I think I think any discipline comes from the Virgo rising sign.
Yeah.
But yeah, Moon in Aries is responsible for a lot.
But also like self-motivator, you know. So sometimes like Moon in Aries can be very self-motivational. Like you don't need, you know, 700 other people telling you something, or you'll be like, oh, I have it or I don't have it. I do it or I don't do it. If I do it now.
I don't have that kind of cold, unemotional thing that Aquarians are supposed to. I've never found that with but you know, Aquarians have this reputation as being cold and unemotional because we're off somewhere on another planet, and I'm totally off somewhere on another planet, but I have all of the feelings all of the time, constantly shifting, and I think that's and drive and passion and things, and I think that's the Moon in Aries.
But it's a good mix. It is a good mix because it is elementally quite nicely combined, you know, like you're kind of covered on a lot of sides here, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. All right. Anyway, Emily, I'm going to wrap it up with this fascinating astrological conversation, because I'm an astrologer, so I'm always like, I love it. So thanks for telling us your sun, moon, and star sign. I will be looking out for the Oracle deck. I'm curious about it. And so let's see what else you come up with. I will link every, like your Instagram. Do you want me to link anything else under the description?
Yeah, it'd be great if you could put my website, which is
your
just
website? Cool,
yeah,
sure.
it's just emilycarding.com.
Cool. That's easy to remember as well.
It
I
is.
will.
Mm.
It was lovely to meet you, Emily. Thank you for providing us with these beautiful decks. And I hope,
Thank you.
I wish you all the amazing, so for the amazing ideas to just come up and manifest, for all the decks to be the
Not
best.
too many at once, though,
No,
please.
I know.
This lack of ideas has never been my problem.
See, that's very Aquarian.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a delight to talk with you.
You too. Thank you so much for coming on. And thanks everybody for watching. And see you next time. Thanks, Emily. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.